First of all, you calling me out like this on the internet? My God.
Bloop boop boo. Bloop doop doo. Bloop doop da boo.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael.
I'm Rameen.
Our score of Final Fantasy VII was one of the first things we did on this channel. It's very old, and our tastes have specified a little bit more, I think, since then, and the way we've used this scorecard has changed a little bit in the meantime. I think it would be interesting to take another look at this score. Rameen, if you had to guess where Final Fantasy VII ranked in your favorite video games of all time, is it top 5, top 10, top 30? What do you think?
Let's say top 10.
I'd say 10 or 15 for me. So that's part of why I wanted to start with that question. So this is everything that has been scored on our YouTube channel in order. If we look for Final Fantasy VII, we don't get it until 29. Final Fantasy VII is in 29th place currently. Everything that's below Final Fantasy VII, I think should be there. There's nothing there that I want to be above Final Fantasy VII. But some of the things that are above it, I think Final Fantasy VII is better than Sea of Stars. I think Final Fantasy VII is probably better than Lunar, Breath of Fire, Live Alive. When we get up to like Lufia 2, that's where I would maybe start to question.
First of all, you calling me out like this on the internet? My God. Revealing that I'm a hypocrite because it wasn't in my top 10.
Another thing to keep in mind is that it's not just my opinions, it's not just your opinions. Your opinion is not counted in all of these. And several of these, especially the ones at the top, are because Erica was giving perfect scores.
I guess I would put Final Fantasy VII above Sea of Stars. I mean, they itch different scratches for me. But I guess objectively, especially for the time it came out.
In the interest of being objective, let's take a look at our individual scores. So initially we gave it 86 and 77. I don't want to bump it up a lot. I was thinking of going to 88. And you don't have to bump it up. You can bump it down if you want.
I mean, I definitely do think it's in the 80s. What was I thinking? I was cruel and vicious.
We scored this game after doing a playthrough review of it. And then you also played the demo of the remake, which was brand new at the time. I think you were kind of Final Fantasy VII out.
I guess I would give it like an 85.
Many of these I would not like to change, but there are a few of these scores that are new.
Y'all, he bumped down on tropes being cliche versus creative.
My score's still higher than yours.
How dare. Do you see the way he treats me? Internet trend alert. We both bumped up on cohesiveness. Would definitely give it a 4 for tone. I think one of the best things about this game is how consistently it strikes a very particular tone that kind of isn't really comparable to anything that came before it.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna bump the tone up to 5.
Yeah, I guess I could agree. I do think that the writing is good, but not perfect.
Right. And some of that is hampered by the rushed translation, but not all of it. Okay. I noticed when I was going through this before that a lot of the scores I was giving to these characters, I was judging Yuffie a little harshly for being a comedic character, and I was judging Sid a little harshly for being not always the nicest guy. But now thinking about it, it's kind of nice that these people who are not perfect are still coming together to be heroes together. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I bumped Barrett up a little bit. Originally, I was a little concerned about what a caricature he is, and he is a caricature, but
Yes.
I think I was forgetting about some of the more humanizing elements of his backstory. I still think Cloud is okay. I don't think he's the, be-all, end-all Final Fantasy protagonist that many people seem to think he is. I do think it's interesting how his insecurities impact the plot. I actually lowered my score for Tifa a little bit, but raised my score for Eris.
One thing that you were saying about Cloud I think is really interesting. And I think even since we gave our initial score of this game, it's changed a little bit. Part of why I don't think Cloud is great is that he is such a macho power fantasy, but that's not the character's fault, it's his reception's fault. And I think that has changed a lot. Even since before the remake came out, I think people are coming to Final Fantasy VII with a much more nuanced point of view than they did, especially around the time the game came out, but in the 10 or 15 years after that as well. People aren't just thinking, guy with big sword, cool, you know? They're realizing that the point of the game is that he develops him piecing together his own psyche and personality is the interesting part.
He's the entire time just enacting, spoiler alert, just enacting this power fantasy based on a person it turns out he hardly even knew. I think people read characters in video games with their eyes more sometimes than they read characters with like their brains and their hearts. Because Cloud looks badass, but actually is kind of a little kid.
And the tough guy persona is fake. It's put on, it's not even his. But it's interesting that it's not Zack's persona either. The misinterpretation of it is very similar to misinterpretation of Fight Club or of American Psycho. It's the same thing. These characters that are meant to be cautionary tales are then seen as aspirational by so many people, incorrectly so.
I actually improved my scores for most of the villains in this game. With the exception of a few kind of one-off like Palmer, a lot of the villains rank from like the campy fun of Scarlet to like the disturbing sci-fi horror of Hojo. Like it's fun that there's a variety.
That's where Palmer is trying to fit in but doesn't. Like he's so campy and over the top.
Right, he's not a threat.
Yeah, and it's also, it feels a little insulting. It feels a little fat phobic. It feels a little, I don't know what else.
Okay, I do feel like I might be being a little overly generous here with Biggs and Wedge and stuff. Some of this is really just nostalgia factor when you get down to it.
That's an interesting thing about rating this game now, when it's been a while since we've each played it, I'm sure. Like, I played the first 2 hours of it on stream a couple of weeks ago. I'm going just on my memory, so it feels a little different. And I think that my memory is a little bit friendlier.
Here's the thing about gender balance that's getting me in this game. If we're talking about it in terms of a straight tally, I mean, yeah, it's balanced. There's girls and guys. But if we're talking about it in terms of the quality and value of the representation, I think the men get better representation is what I'm getting at.
But it's also sort of like, how much is this par for the course? At this point, are we expecting it to be better? Yes, we should always be expecting it to be better. That's always the trickiest question on this for everything, but it's something that I think we should always evaluate.
I did improve my real feeling, not just stock cares scoring. I do like that the characters in this game mostly feel like they have both flaws and strengths in terms of personality.
Hey, so are you enjoying this discussion that Rameen and I are having? If you are, please give this video a like. It really does help the channel out, helps with visibility. And if you're interested in hearing us and our other friends talk more about video games or music or some other media, subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of blabbermouthing about whatever we feel like it, basically. We're going mostly chronologically through time, so we're able to compare other things that are happening at the same time is the goal of this. And if you're only interested in the video game stuff, there's a video game playlist for you, so check that out. All right, back to the video.
Graphics. Super good.
So I did add a new section to graphics for this. When I was scoring Wild Arms recently, I was comparing it against Final Fantasy VII because they came out very close to each other. In Wild Arms, there are 2D graphics for everything until the battles, and then the battles turn 3D and look significantly worse. In Final Fantasy VII, everything is 3D, but the 3D graphics in the battles, I think, look significantly better. There's the regular gameplay sprites, the real blocky, hands, especially, that always sticks out to me. Then there's the battle graphics, which look much more proportional and cleaner.
Cool.
And then there's the cutscenes, which are even better.
I actually improved my scoring for this in general because I think that if you think about what was out at the time, at least in the turn-based RPG genre, there isn't really a lot that competes graphically with this game at the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with you there, especially playing everything in order that it's come out for the most part, other than a few exceptions. The games that stick to 2D sprites hold up way better than the 3D polygons do. I think the battle graphics look good still, and especially for the time, they look really good. But I don't know, it's sort of hard for me to take these serious scenes seriously when you're seeing this real blocky character with, giant bricks for hands acting.
I don't know, it didn't bother me that much. I don't know, I think this game's graphics hold up. I don't know that I agree about the 2D thing. I think that our eyes tend to be more forgiving of 2D games with good reason in terms of their graphical advancement. I guess that all I'm trying to say is that for the time, I think this game's graphics hold up.
I think when it comes to 2D versus 3D graphics, it's a personal taste thing, but we're taking personal taste into this all the time anyway. And I tend to prefer to suspend my disbelief a little bit more with 2D sprites as compared to doing the same with polygons. I think you can get so much more interesting detail in a sprite that gives it so much more character than you can get from a lot of polygons.
All right, now we're sort of grading the artistic appeal of designs, right?
Yes.
Like the aesthetics. Some of these, it's so hard not to let my thoughts on the character as a whole affect my score. I feel like it's the truest sign of my maturity as a human being that I'm now grading Sid higher than I used to. I've really grown up.
I think it's interesting how the Nomura designs for characters feel like such a different world from all of the Amano designs for characters. And I used to really hate that with the giant feet and the giant zippers all over the place. Not so many zippers in this game, that comes later. But now, I don't know, I think I appreciate it more than I used to.
I'm trying to remember what the Rufus one even looks like.
My score for his character in the game is just because his long white coat ends up looking like he's wearing like a snowsuit and they're big white puffy pants instead. And I think it sort of cheapens how callous and sinister he is.
I don't know that I agree, but I definitely think that his is not as accurate to the designs compared to some of the others. I really like all the transportation in this game, actually.
Yeah, and I think the way it's implemented, even though that's more in gameplay, well, it's also in story, the way that obtaining new transportation limits where you can go on the world map and the story reasons for all of that, I think it's one of the most effective ways to sort of narrow this otherwise mostly open world to like just the places you can go for story reasons. I think it's really effective and among the best in Final Fantasy for that.
Oh, music.
I'm bumping it up. It's still not my favorite, but I'm bumping it up.
Yeah, I think this is a good soundtrack. Like it's solid. The way that the music crafts this world and this prevailing sense of dread that exists in this setting, it's nice. And it's not overpowering.
It's interesting to see what Uematsu and his team were able to do with the new hardware available. I don't think that they always chose the best sounding instruments, but the composition is still just as strong. Like there are very, very few weak compositions of his that I've ever heard. I think in general, they're top notch. And even if they're not my favorite of his, sort of like we've talked about many times before, a less good Uematsu score is still going to be among the best of all time. Gameplay. Okay, so I do still think that moving around in the towns and dungeons is a little awkward because it's sort of hard to see what you can walk on and what you cannot occasionally.
Yeah. Or you'll bump into things that it's not clear were there.
Right. Mini games. Many of these really suck.
Oh god, you like the Fort Condor? Oh god.
I think it's fun.
Why?
I think it's an interesting, different change of pace. I also like older strategy RPGs more than you do.
Oh god, I hated the entire Gold Saucer.
Same.
Oh god, the snowboarding.
Snowboarding is real bad. Most people hate the submarine minigame. I think it's kind of fun. All right, so now if we scroll to the top and take a look at our new score, the game now gets an 85 instead of an 80. And I think that makes a lot more sense. That feels more correct to me. If we take a look at where this fits now in this, I'm going to leave the old version there. Now we get an 85. Oh. It didn't move up a lot, and I sort of wasn't expecting it to, but I think that's the correct spot for it now.
I feel like it should even be higher. Maybe I was too mean.
Let's take a look again. We can change again.
No.
Looking at this now, I still think maybe Final Fantasy VII should be a higher score than Lunar, Breath of Fire, Live Alive, Ogre Battle. But that's only like a 2-point difference then, and it might be that these scores should be lower also. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where all this stuff should go.
My only question is how many of these games and this content that's been reviewed has been subjected to the same level of scrutiny, I guess, or the same standards? The biggest question of all is, why does it really matter if it's all objective? And what we think, guys, doesn't have to be what you think. In fact, if you disagree and Cloud is your not gay at all boyfriend for life, sound off in the comments about how I'm the worst.
I think with all of these, and this is something that I have to remind Molly of all the time, it's not really the points that matter, it's what these numbers make us talk about in our discussion. That's really the important part. And even with that, you're free to disagree with us, and I encourage you to.
It's not the size of your Buster Sword. It's the motion of your life stream ocean.
Ew.
That was a translation error. Made a lot more sense in Japanese.
Thanks again for stopping by, everybody. Again, please like this video if you feel like it. Up here is another video that YouTube thinks you might like, so check that out. Down here is a playlist of other video game related videos. Check that out if you're interested. And that's about it. Maintain your groovy selves.